thank you, members of the press. As the CEO, Dr. Ezekiel Mutua, has actually read out the statement, it is quite a very sad, moment in the industry, the music industry, and the more so the collective administration of copyright through the CMOs. Indeed, we want to request the government, as the statement has made it, that we go for further consultation on this regard as we look into how the IP bill is going to be published, rather than the piecemeal changes that have been over the past years done on the Copyright Act. Thank you, and I think, CEO, that is the position, and we would want to actually welcome all of you so that we can engage and look at how best we can run the industry. Thank you.
Yeah, just to add on what Peter is saying, in terms of what we are calling legislative impunity and chaos by Kecobo, the Kenya Copyright Act has been amended 7 times since 2001 and 4 times within the last 3 years. Like we've said, only 2 months we had the president sign the Copyright Amendment Act 2001. That was very good for the industry. It has provided great benefits. We are now in the process of trying to implement the law that the president signed 2 months ago. Because the law in itself is not an end, there must be mechanisms for implementation to ensure that musicians who have been exploited by getting the lesser percentage in skiza tunes get the amount of money that are contained in the law that the president signed, which is 52%, and therefore this is music to our musicians. We are in the process of implementing that. Then now we ambushed with other amendments that are sneaked in through the back door under miscellaneous amendment. For starters, miscellaneous amendments is an omnibus law that carries amendments to many other laws and is only used to make minor changes. It's not supposed to have fundamental implications on the main act. This could be typos or just minor changes in definitions, like if in the case when the constitution changed and instead of minister we have cabinet secretary. It's supposed to have those minor changes. They are not supposed to be sweeping or far-reaching implications in terms of the changes. But what we are seeing now, what Kecobo has sneaked under this omnibus law or miscellaneous amendment bill 2022 will actually be an overhaul on the Copyright Act. And therefore, even procedurally, that is wrong. The industry has a lot of potential. I joined this industry because I have studied it, I have been in it. I can see the amount of billions that should be paid to musicians and make our musicians rich like in other countries. There is a lot of money. Digital migration, which I was part of when I worked as a Secretary of Information in the Ministry of ICT, brought with it expanded spectrum, new media platforms, including vernacular stations. We have, I think, an increase of almost 1,000 in terms of the media houses that are in operation since 2015. All these media houses play music. That is supposed to translate to money in the pockets of musicians. The same music is on ICT platforms, on our phones, on computers, on all these kind of platforms that have come up. Spotify, Boomplay, all this, they are all concentrating on using music. A lot of it belonging to our musicians and to members of international community with whom we have a bilateral agreements. Our work as a CMO is to fight for the rights of musicians, to ensure that there is proper collection and distribution of royalties, and the musicians can gain from the sweat of their brow. artists can gain from their talents. The government has never in any other country collected royalties. The collection and distribution of royalties is a private business that is done by musicians through their CMOs, private companies like Mcsk. So this needs to be understood, because sometimes some of the users of our music and the big tech companies, some of them engage into private arrangements with individual musicians and pay them, and that's how exploitation comes in. That's why the industry is not growing, because we have allowed cartels that are declaring billions in terms of profits, but ideally they're not paying musicians as much. That's why world over it is CMOs, which are societies belonging to artists themselves, constitutionally under the rights of association, who come together, and because the musicians have assigned the mandate of administering copyright to the CMOs, then the CMOs collect and pay or distribute royalties on behalf of artists who are their members in line with the law or the tariffs that are supposed to be gazetted by Kecobo. Therefore, the work of government is just to regulate. It's not to collect or distribute. It's not to be a private company. Now, what Kecobo is proposing is to have a collection management agency, or an agency, an agent. Actually, that's what they are calling it in the proposed amendments. An agent will collect and distribute. A government agency that will collect and distribute on behalf of private citizens. There is no other industry that has that kind of approach. You can't collect bills for hotels and pay, the hotel owners, or for landlords. The government does not collect rent on behalf of landlords. I mean, this is impunity that borders on insanity. And I think this speaks to how much money there is. That's why there's so much interest. And our appeal is that these proposals are withdrawn. Let us remove them from the amendments. We are not against the other provisions that touch on other laws. Our concern is the sections of the Miscellaneous Statute Law Miscellaneous Amendment Bill 2022 that touch on copyright. We are saying only 2 months ago, the President ascended into law amendments or Copyright Amendment Act. How can we have other provisions within the Miscellaneous Amendment 2 months after the President signed the Copyright Amendment? I think you can see the mischief. By sneaking them under Miscellaneous, an omnibus law, they were hoping that we will never notice. And so it will go unnoticed and will be caught unawares by an agent owned by the government collecting and distributing royalties. These are politicians are gaining. A lot of these politicians own these companies. They are cartels in the industry. And then they blame Mcsk. They say we are not paying. What do we pay when we are not collecting? You can only pay after you have collected. There is no collection without, there is no distribution without collection. And unless we highlight these issues and make this case very clear that Kecobo is a distraction, that Kecobo is the enemy of the music industry, that the Kecobo is run, if there was to be proper investigation, it would be established that that institution needs to be disbanded. There is wisdom in what the cabinet did 2 weeks ago by approving the Intellectual Property of Kenya bill that will merge Kecobo with Kipi and create a new regulatory body. That is something that we support. And I think the attention of the industry should be now on that bill that has gone through cabinet. We cannot be having mutilation and a multiplicity of bills amending the same law and with the same provisions. You can see where the problem is. It is not with the CMOs. There is something that the government is up to through Kecobo, or Kecobo is doing that the government is not aware about. And that's why we are raising these concerns and pleading with the Attorney General and the Leader of Majority in the National Assembly to withdraw in total the sections of copyright under the Statute Law Miscellaneous Amendment Bill 2022, because copyright does not need more amendments given what is already going on. under the Kenya Industrial Property Act and the amendments that were signed into law by the President in the Copyright Amendment Bill 2021 only 2 months ago. So that's the clarity I wanted to give, and request if there is any further clarification or comment, then we can engage with you. Thank you very much.